Good evening, members. Thank you very much for coming out on this far too balmy summer evening. And good evening, officers of the Council. We have no members of the public, and welcome to this meeting of the Governance and Audit Committee. Unfortunately, as we are not quorate, as we've just recently just had a further apology, the meeting today will be for noting, and then we will just agree everything at the next quorate meeting in November. I hope that's okay. So, fire evacuation procedure, as usual, if the fire alarm is activated, we vacate the offices via the stairs, don't use the lifts, and assemble in Hawley Square on the green. And officers will assist and advise when deemed safe to return to the chamber. And does anyone intend to film? I don't think so. And everyone makes sure, and I'll do this myself because I was on call, so I had my phone on, if that their phones are on silent. Please note this meeting is being live streamed for members of the public and it'll be recorded and broadcast on the Council's YouTube channel. Any councillors wishing to speak under Council Procedure Rule 20.1? No? Lovely. Updated apologies for absence. We have received apologies from Councillor Britcher, Councillor Scott, Councillor Evans, Councillor Donaldson, Councillor Green, Councillor Harry Scobie and Councillor Packman. Anyone else that I've missed? No, okay. Any declarations of interest? No? Great. So we'll move on to agenda item 3. This is our regaining assurance strategy for Thanet District Council. I wasn't sure, Chris, if you wanted to introduce and then is it and then hand over as appropriate?
I'm actually going to ask Matt to introduce,
Perfect.
if that's okay,
Okay, sure.
and then hand over, because Matt is far more familiar with the detail of the accounts, although it's my name that goes against him. It's Matt and his team that do all the work, and Matt can give a bit of an update of where we are. As of today and tomorrow, we've made some real progress, and then can hand over to colleagues from GT to present the paper.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chair. This report presents the regaining assurance strategy developed in partnership with external auditors Grant Thornton to establish a clear roadmap for restoring full external audit assurance for Thanet District Council. While a disclaimer of opinion remains expected for 25-26 financial year, the Council and Grant Thornton are initiating a phased multi-year strategy to systematically rebuild financial assurance. 25-26 audit focus priority will be placed on validating in-year transactions such as income, expenditure, payroll, capital accounting and disclosures, as well as closing balances. Sign-off is targeted for the 30th of November 2026, well ahead of the 31st of January 2027 statutory backstop. 26-27 trajectory, transition toward a qualified opinion as prior year balances are progressively recovered. 27-28 target full recovery, achieving an unmodified clean audit opinion. It is also of note that since the writing of this report, Grant Thornton have finalised matters pertaining to financial years 2018-19 to 2023-24, with only 24-25 to be finalised, which will be tomorrow, and the 25-26 audit is progressing as planned. So I will now hand over to GT so that they can discuss it in more detail.
Thank you, Matt. Good evening all, and thank you, Chair, as well. We've got 2 reports for you today. Firstly, I'll take you through the Regaining Assurance report, where we'll then welcome any questions, and then I'll take you through our progress report. I'll take the paper as read, but just want to highlight some of the key areas for you this evening. So firstly, on page 5 of our report, or 13 of the pack, we detail the background of why we're producing this assessment and the process that's being followed. We know this is driven by both MHCLG and PSAA, who are requesting detailed assessments of the trajectory and plans for regaining assurance due to the previous disclaimed opinions of bodies. This is to support them in better understanding the risks, potential scope, and to allow for more targeted and better support to be provided to those local authorities. We've therefore formulated, as Matt said, in agreement with management, our proposed assessment. So this is detailed from page 7 of our report, or 15 of your pack. We've placed the Council into category B against the MHCLG framework. This means that we recognise that regaining assurance is possible in the timeline set, though this does come with several significant operational difficulties and challenges. This is due in part to the lack of assurance that we have over the opening balances and the reserves, and therefore the quite significant challenge in relation to firstly collating the extensive multi-year evidence to support these, and then the work to then regain the assurance as needed. Then on page 8 of the report, or 16 of the pack, we've detailed how this plan trajectory would impact our future opinions over this period, moving from the disclaimed opinion that is anticipated for 24-25 and then for 25-26 to a potential qualified or unmodified opinion. Though we do note this is just an estimate and is contingent on us being able to deliver all of our planned work over those periods in both the in-year transactions and the regaining assurance work. This assessment further reinforces that despite the anticipated disclaimer of opinion for 25-26, there's a real importance to us completing our planned work, and that this really is essential to helping support us in rebuilding the planned recovery. And as noted in our following report, our work is now underway for that period, and we are hoping to finalise our work on the in-year transactions and closing balances in line with the deadline of the 30th of November that we're aiming for. Finally, I just want to highlight our next steps and the timelines on page 11 of the report or 19 of the pack that details some of our key milestones to ensure that we would be able to deliver against this plan. I'll just pause there, and myself and Darren will welcome any questions that you may have.
Thanks so much. I think Chris wanted to come in.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say to the committee, I think this is a really fair and balanced report and assessment of our sort of audit and finance position at the moment. Darren and I have spent some time talking it through. There are some sort of, why I completely accept where we're at the moment. What Darren and I have been talking about, are there any ways that we can accelerate assurance? It is really challenging, but what a key consideration for me, and I think the committee needs to think about, is looking at this through a local government reorganisation context, because 27-28 is our last year of operation, but those accounts will be finished after vesting day, and that's really a bit too late for the new unitary. What we need is as much assurance as possible for our 26-27 accounts, because that's when the new unitary, that's the information the new unitary will be using to form its budget estimates for the first year of operations, and particularly around our usable reserves. I've spoken many a time in this chamber around the challenges we've got with reserves, and again, that's an area that Darren and I have said, is there scope to actually change and slant some of the audit work to get some more assurance around reserves, because that's going to be really important for the authority as we transition to new unitary status. But happy as well with colleagues from GT to take any questions.
No, thank you. That's helpful to know that we're going to be quite targeted when we look at what's going to happen with unitary. So does anyone have any comments or anything they'd like to share? Go ahead, Councillor Davis.
Thanks, and I'd echo what Chris said about it's a pretty candid report. Given the difficulties in finding an opening balance and the fact that, and again, we haven't spoken before, but I've spoken with your predecessors. How much of this difficulty with establishing an open balance is down to the rolling forward of unfinished accounts, and how much is down to, I remember, and as I say, please don't take this personally yourself, but the horrendous performance figures of external audit and how much work hadn't been done every year for a variety of reasons that were given. Are we potentially being disadvantaged and made to suffer here because of the failings of an external company? Sorry, it's a bit of a blunt one, but it's got to be asked, I have to say. I would also put into that one of the items in the accounts in an objection that had rolled on for several years, I was one of the authors of that objection. I have been repeatedly assured that it was settled, and it hasn't been. So, as I say, I just wanted to throw that in there to say this is not John just being, I do have those concerns.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. I'm sure Darren will set out and defend his firm's position and in the market in terms of where they are and their overall position. And if you look in Kent, I think it's us and three others, Ashford, Dartford and Gravesham, that have been backstopped as well. Some other authorities are up to date. That's a mixed position. Some of that is due to audit backlogs, and some of that, I would say, is in part due to our own circumstances. What I would say is our accounts have always been completed. It's not been able to get assurance of it. I think the origin of it, and Matt was obviously familiar with this as well, was when we had this Section 24 report issued by Sarah Ironmonger. Because of the dysfunction of the corporate management team, the auditors were not able to they were not happy to conclude their opinion at that time, which caused a lot of delay, and that sort of ramped up. Added to that, I think it's fair to say the finance team have had a fair amount of turnover during that period of time, which has probably made the audit more challenging. But I don't think it would be fair for me to say this sits solely with Grant Thornton. Some of that is due to the circumstances the organisation found itself in. But Darren, I don't know if you want to add to that as well.
Thank you. So can you hear me okay? I don't know if it's coming through. So as a firm, our performance does speak for itself in that we have the highest proportion of audits over the years that have been completed, despite numerous issues within local government sector. And as you have alluded to, there are a multitude of factors that contribute to each individual authority's position. I'm pleased to hear Chris's view for the position here at Thanet. I think what's important to recognise is we are up to date in the issuing of the opinions for the prior years and the certificates for those prior years. So my predecessors have satisfied themselves that they've discharged all of their responsibilities. I will issue the opinion for the 24-25 accounts, which was my first year, tomorrow. I won't issue the certificate for that year because we haven't completed an objection that was made to the 24-25 accounts, but that's in progress and nearing completion. To your first point about what does rebuilding seek to recover, you're absolutely spot on in the sense that for each of those years where we don't have any audit work to rely upon, we have to devise a programme that seeks to test the transactions that were undertaken in those years. So I think for Thanet, I think it will principally focus on 2 years where a disclaimed opinion was issued, because in some of those other years where a disclaimed opinion was issued, audit work was undertaken. But there were a couple of years, due to various reasons, that no substantive audit work was undertaken. So those years will be our focus. It will be more than a normal audit, but it will be focused on specific areas. Because as we've undertaken work last year, as we undertake the audit for 25-26, we're building up and we're getting assurances from those years' work, particularly on closing balances.
Thank you so much for a substantive, really good answer and explaining things, as I say. And I'm sorry to hit you with the hard one, but it's a question that had to be asked. But thank you very much. I think you've answered it well.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any comments they'd like to make? Go ahead, Councillor Yates.
Thanks. Yeah. It feels like in local government at the moment we've got this kind of grace period before the chaos of LGR really kicks off. And with the Section 151 saying it'd be nice if things could be done quicker, I was just wondering, is there capacity within Grant Thornton to move things, get things done faster? Are there any what are the big risks to Grant Thornton of delays? Because I think those two questions kind of worry me. The deadline you've already got for 25-26 of 30th of November is already very close to the statutory deadline of January 2027. So I think my two questions are really like, what is it possible to do things quicker, and what are the big risks of delays to the schedule as written?
Thank you, Councillor. So for 25-26, the statutory deadline is 31st of January 27. So we've already, with agreement with Chris, we're accelerating the process for the 25-26 audit. It's almost a dry run because after 25-26, you're quite right, the statutory deadline will be the end of November. So this is a chance for both sides to see, is it possible? And if it isn't, what are the factors that prevent it? And then we can start to work on that. As I said, the focus will principally be on 2 years of audits as part of the build back work. Capacity from our side won't be a constraint. We're able to devote the time that's going to be needed to undertake the work. It will require, and we set it out in the report, it will require the commitment and the full support of the finance team and the wider authority to allow us to work through queries, get responses to evidence so that we can get that work undertaken as quickly as possible. The report, when we showed the trajectory of audit opinions, the last one for 27-28 is green, shows qualified. But I think we updated that and it may not have trickled through. So we're envisaging for 27-28, it's qualified stroke unmodified. That's the cusp that we're aiming for. So we will seek to do as much work as we can in 26-27 to rebuild, but with a recognition that some might still need to go into 27-8 as part of the rebuilding, but with a view, all things being equal, to give an unqualified opinion for the 27-28 accounts.
And just what are the big risks of that not happening? I guess it's also for TDC, that question, thanks.
Thank you,
Go
Chair.
ahead, Matt.
Thank you. So one of the things I wanted to point out based on what Darren's just said is he's alluded to the fact that one of the key priorities is ensuring that the organisation in totality, but primarily the finance team, are resourced consistently and to a position where we can respond to queries in a timely manner. I think it's worth saying that the reason we've caught up and that we've got 24-25 out of the way and 25-26 is on track is because we now have a permanent appointment in post in terms of technical finance who collates and coordinates and produces the statement of accounts and has done in a timely manner. He's also uber efficient, to be fair, at responding to audit queries, and he's chasing everybody. And I think we've lacked consistency for a period of time because we had a member of staff that had done the same job for 30 years and was incredibly efficient, and then we had a number of failings with regards to agency staff that struggled with adapting to the way Thanet worked. We're now in a position we've got a permanent member of staff in place. The team is fully resourced, so I don't have any major concerns with regards to providing information to GT.
If I could just to build on what Matt was saying in terms of their period, we had some turnover and difficulty recruiting. Does anyone remember that thing called the pandemic that we happened? Yeah, the officer that we had, she left in the March of 2020, and then we went down into lockdown and we couldn't recruit anyone. And we obviously also changed our operating model in terms of remote working. Instead of being based in the office, Grant Thornton did the same. It was nigh on impossible to get anyone that would come into the office. Everyone wanted to work remotely, understandably, which caused a lot of problems during that period of time. Things are settling back down now. The officer that Matt referred to, Simon Jones, is absolutely superb. I cannot praise him highly enough. He's doing a fantastic job, and a lot of the sort of the progress we've made and that Matt's referred to is off the back of his hard work, and just wanted to recognise that. But yeah, the risks are there. In addition just to general turnover, you referenced, Councillor, LGR chaos. I mean, that is that we've got on our corporate risk register a disorderly transition. That is a real risk to the organisation if, along with our own financial position, if we have staff flights as people decide, actually, do you know what, I don't fancy transition. I don't want to work in a unitary. I'm going to go maybe retire a little bit earlier than I thought, or do you know what, I'm going to go work somewhere else. We don't know yet. It may mean that people actually hang tight. It may mean that people leave, but there is obviously some risk there with change that could affect our staff base.
Thank you. Sorry, did you want to come back, Councillor Yates?
Yeah, just very quickly, just so as we go into next year, is there a kind of an update on this report coming back to this committee at a timing which could be indicative of whether we're on schedule? And is it worth having a further discussion next year to try and move things along if it is slipping off schedule? I don't know.
Thank you. So what we've said to Chris and Matt is, and what we've said to you, or will say to you now, is all of this is predicated on allowing us in that we can complete all of the planned work for 25-26 by the end of November. So we will report to you at your November meeting if we've achieved that. What we will then do in December and report to you in January is to be very clear about the quantum of work that we're going to seek to try and do in the first quarter of 26-27 as part of the rebuilding. So that's how we'll update you on what we intend to do and what the outcome will be of that future work.
Perfect, thanks.
Thank you. That all sounds very reassuring, pending the unknown quantities that we can't deal with. Anyone have any further comments on that? Lovely. So we'll have to just agree to note that one, I'm afraid, because we're not quorate, but we can confirm these decisions in our next meeting in November. So we're going to move on to agenda item 4, which is the audit progress report and sector updates. Who would like to introduce this one? Should we go? Yep, let's go straight to the team. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. Again, I'll take the report as read, but just want to highlight some of the key areas from our progress update. So namely on page 5 of the report, or 29 of your pack, where we note that our work to date on the financial statements audit for 25-26. For this, as we've just discussed, we've received the draft financial statements from management and have been undertaking our initial reviews and our sampling ahead of our field work and detailed testing formally kicking off. As noted, as part of our initial review, we have considered the arrangements with regard to the prospective group that was highlighted within our audit plan, though we've now completed that review and in line with management's assessment, we've determined that this is not material and thus the group accounts and our subsequent procedures in relation to this are not required. In terms of our sampling work so far, we've managed to get out several of our I&E samples over to the team, which they're hoping to work through in conjunction with us then returning later on to get through the detailed field work. And again, thank you to the team for their help in providing those elements so far. Additionally, our work on value for money is now underway, with our risk assessment being completed in April. And as we detailed within our plan, we highlighted 2 risks of significant weakness, which are a continuation of those that were raised in 24-25. Our review with respect to these arrangements and our wider fieldwork in relation to this is currently underway, though we note that at the moment we have no further significant matters to bring to your attention at this time. Then our report details some further information regarding regaining assurance and arrangements for the backstop that build upon the themes of our regaining assurance report. And these are then followed up by several sector updates, including articles on local government reorganisation and the impacts of indexation with respect to property valuations and further linked resources. Thank you again, and we welcome any questions you have.
Thanks so much. Does anyone have any questions on the report or any comments? Excellent. Are we happy to note that update and we can confirm all decisions next time, like we said? Yes, lovely. So next we're moving on to agenda item 5, which is our quarter one review. And I'm not sure which of you would like to go ahead with this. Go ahead, Chris.
I'll go first, and Matt will probably jump in if I've forgotten anything significant. So treasury management, that's how we manage our investments, our borrowing, our cash on a day-to-day basis. So this is the first quarter. We set the strategy for the year back in February at full council. Some key things to highlight. So gross debt, so that's the total amount of borrowing that we've got on our books as at the end of June, was 90.5 million, and that's up quite significantly from the same time last year. So it was this time last year it was 37.1 million, and now it's 90.5. The majority of that is obviously related to the housing acquisition, both in the HRA and in our general fund for temporary accommodation. On the 29th of May of this year, we drew down a new £10 million loan from the Public Works Loan Board. That was a fixed rate of 4.95%, and that's all related to the housing revenue account. I'm pleased to confirm that we've stayed well within the prudential limits and the compliance limits that are set. So we have an operational boundary of 186 million and an authorised borrowing limit of 191 million. So you can see that 90.5 million debt that we're holding is well within those limits that we're allowed to operate in without having to go back to council and ask for an increase. Quarter one capital spend was only 13.1 million, 9.1 was that general fund and 4 was HRA. That's against a full year capital budget of almost 190 million, and I don't need to do the exact maths. It's quite clear that 13 million isn't a quarter of 190, so they've got a lot to do to catch up in the second half of the year if they're going to get anywhere near spending what we set out in the budget. In terms of investment returns, investment balances are pretty much similar sort of position to where they were this time last year, 44 million compared to 40.8. The average rate that we're getting on that is 3.9%, which is just slightly above the benchmark rate of 3.75% that we set as our target. That has generated just under 400,000, so 0.397 mil in investment income, and that's almost 100,000 higher than we had in the budget as our target. So that's very welcome, as I've set out already at Cabinet and at OSP, that we're in a difficult position financially this year, so any additional investment income will help to mitigate some of those pressures. In terms of how our investments are spread, they remain in very high credit liquid investments, 40.2, so the vast majority are in money market funds. There's 2 million in bond funds and 2 million in sustainable time limited deposits, and the rest, so 200,000, is effectively in instant access bank accounts. So the committee is requested to review and note the report, and we're happy to take any questions.
Matt, do you have something to add?
Just one thing to add, Chair. We've discussed previously, it's been brought up a few times with regards to the slippage in relation to the capital programme, and I know it's likely to be a question. What I would say is that the Q1 monitoring report is being written in the context of said slippage, so that we're not reporting it every month as being a massive underspend. It will be reported in Q1 as to how much is going to be slipped into future years. So the HRA programme, the general fund, LUF and so on and so forth are being reprofiled on that basis, so you don't have to, every time you see a report, ask why the information is still being presented in the same format.
Thank you very much for expertly anticipating the most likely question. Does anyone else have some questions? Go ahead, Councillor Davies.
Thanks. I just wanted to clarify that the slippage you're talking about is on the acquisitions on the social housing with those loans?
On multiple elements of the capital programme, so there'll be a big chunk of it will be on slippage in terms of acquisitions.
And by slippage, you're talking about behind target in terms of completions? Yeah?
No, not necessarily behind target in terms of completion. The budget was built on the premise of X amount of millions for the purchase. Obviously, they've agreed the purchase of said things, but as you say, that completion might be 6 months, 8 months, 10 months later, and so payment's not made until turnkey. So.
I was just, as I say, slippage covers a lot, doesn't it? So, yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Thank you very much, Chair, yes.
If I could just add, it's not necessarily for this committee in terms of looking at the nuts and bolts of the capital programme, the slippage, but as Matt said, that will be going to Cabinet. I think when we're looking at that slippage, given the life of the organisation, we can only slip it forward one more year if we're going to complete it within the life of this organisation. So that's something for members to consider when they're presented with those recommendations.
Go ahead, Councillor Yates.
Yeah, just following on from that then, because I do love to mention how every year we look at the capital expenditure budget and we don't meet it at all or get close to it. Is it possible that we can actually recommend that we want to see a Gantt chart of both HRA and general fund, including obviously the regen projects, but that's all within the general fund probably, to see when they expect this to be spent, because I think that would be reassuring. Because there's often quite...
Do you want me to come in on that there? I
Yeah.
think that's probably something for overview and scrutiny rather than governance and audit, because here we're looking at, because Gantt charts you'd be dealing with individual schemes, which for me is operations rather than overall treasury management in terms of what we're looking at.
Then the question becomes, what controls are in place to stop this?
That's something we can look at and bring back to the next meeting in terms of overall controls of the capital programme.
Because, every year the controls obviously aren't working because people put in budgets which aren't at all achievable.
No, I mean, I share your frustration. As Section 151 officer, it's really frustrating when we overspend on revenue and underspend on capital repeatedly. That's not the way. I'd much rather see us get close to controlling our revenue spending and get closer to spending those capital budget allocations. So I've said, I think it was OSP recently, that our budget forecasting hasn't been good enough. That's quite clear through the demonstrable evidence that we've got from our outturn from last year. Revenue forecasts have been too optimistic, and the capital forecasts in terms of their spend have been too optimistic as well. So I think that's a fair question to ask that we can bring back to the committee in terms of how we can tighten that up.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Next one, just on LGR then. So is there any restrictions on treasury management when it comes to LGR? Is there a time frame where upon you can no longer tie in huge amounts of cash into long-term investments and so forth?
Indirectly, there will be, because once the structural change order is in place and the voluntary joint committees or shadow council, whatever form of governance we're operating at the time, they will have certain oversight of the level of spending. Particularly, I would expect some attention on CapEx, on capital spending, which would then dictate the amount of borrowing that you would undertake. I'm not aware, Darren may know otherwise, of any particular mechanisms the government have or the new unitary authority to stop us undertaking any borrowing. I don't think you've heard that, but indirectly they can limit your spending through saying you should, they're reasonable controls. We don't want the council necessarily to go out and build a new leisure centre just before you're about to partner with a neighbouring authority, and you might have two jutting up right next to each other. So there'd be those sort of sensible controls in place, which would therefore limit the amount of borrowing that you were undertaking. But I'm not aware of any, discrete mechanism in place to stop us saying you can't borrow that money or you can't invest in those institutions through LGR, unless, Darren, you're aware of anything.
No, I'm not. There's an arrangement, I think it's Section 24, which defines the if a type of decision that might be made, all with the intention that if it's to bind the successor authority in for a long period, then that decision has to be run through the successor body. I'm not sure the Treasury management would fall under that.
Do you have anything further?
Yeah, just to follow on that then. So as far as our treasury management is concerned, we're not letting LGR impact how we invest in our investment strategy and how we treat cash.
No, not like it's still. I think that's still sort of sovereign for the council to determine all the way up to vesting day. We'll be bound by a treasury management strategy in terms of where the council's risk appetite is, how much we're willing to place in one particular counterparty, types of investments we use, for example.
Thanks. Yeah. So if there can be some, bring board back to the next meeting, some, I don't know, I don't know if it's an agenda item about the controls on general fund and HRA, but
On capital spending, yeah, we can look at that.
is that okay, Chair?
If the chair and the committee are in agreement, we can bring something.
Yeah, we can add that into the November meeting. I think just to clarify your question about the budget, I think it's that why do we have a budget of 190 million which we're not going to meet? I think perhaps that question is more for overview and scrutiny, but we can certainly discuss the further issues in November. Does anyone else have anything further to say on that? Oh, go ahead, Councillor Davis.
It was only just to say it's a tricky one that nobody wants to impart too many controls, obviously, and it's business as usual. But the lesson was only up the road because it was Herne Bay Pier that was signed off on the day before vesting, wasn't it? So, I guess they're a necessary evil, aren't they? So.
Yeah, we've got some proper local governance geeks at the authority. Nick Hughes is probably amongst the biggest of them, and he tells me of a story somewhere in the northwest around Liverpool of the 1974 reorganisation. One of the authorities sort of determined to build a dry ski slope just before it sort of came into or ceased to come into being, and it was an absolute disastrous scheme. Don't think it ever opened, and was a huge waste of taxpayers' money. So those controls are kind of in there to stop sort of rogue political projects. Yeah. It is just up the road, yeah.
Any further comments on that? No? Wonderful. So thank you very much for coming out this evening, and it will make this aspect of the November meeting quicker because we've had a chance to look at the report. So I do appreciate it, even though we're not quorate. It's very good that everyone was able to hear and discuss, and thank you for your contributions. And that concludes